Hello, welcome to this recording of the second in a series of conversations about creation care, sponsored by the Creation Care Task Force at St. Timothy's Church. I'm Bill Shreve, the leader of the Creation Care Task Force. In this series, we hope to start conversations about climate change and creation care that spur people to action. We believe that faith groups are well positioned to lead the movement to harmonize our lifestyle with sustaining creation. We can do this by working as individuals, as communities, as a nation, and as an international leader. All of this work at all levels is needed. Our series of conversations focuses on how we can start this work with our individual actions. Faith is the key. God works in wondrous ways through people of faith. Please join me in prayer. Almighty God, in giving us dominion over things on earth, you made us fellow workers in your creation. Give us wisdom and reverence so to use the resources of nature, that no one may suffer from our abuse of them, and that generations yet to come may continue to praise you for your bounty. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So tonight our speaker is Tom Cabot, and Alan, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce Tom.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Welcome to the kickoff session for the Creation Care series. We have a great local resource speaking with us tonight. This presentation will be followed by a Q&A answer as Bill just described, so please submit your questions via chat. We'll collate them and try to pose them as many as we can after the presentation. So on to Tom, our speaker tonight. Tom Cabot is a Cal Poly engineering alum who worked for Palo Alto Utilities doing solar engineering, efficiency planning, power resource planning, and helped transition the utilities out of the energy crisis and into 100% carbon neutral electricity. Now retired, he's consulting on federal hydropower improvements and with local nonprofits and startups on the effort to fight climate change, all noble goals. With that, Tom, take it away.
Right. Well, thanks everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Thanks so much for recruiting me, and that was mostly Jenny and Nan, friends who I've met a while back. And yep, Janan's right. We did have a lot of fun working together all those years ago, and it was so nice back then in the bliss of not knowing about the whole climate crisis, and not Yeah, I think we were sheltered for quite a while by the fossil fuel companies who were learning about it, and they decided not to inform us of their research. But now the cat's out of the bag, and we've got a lot of work to do, and we have to do it pretty rapidly. So I got some tough news on the climate yesterday and today, and so it's kind of raised my concern level a bit. So you may hear a little more alarm than I normally like in my voice, but what we're learning is each time they go back and study where we are versus all the predictions about where we'd like to be, we keep sliding further down the slope. And so we need to really start figuring out how to work fast. So that's what I'm going to try to focus on tonight, is how do we get out of those starting blocks and how do we start our actions? I'm going to switch over to screen sharing now to share my presentation. All right, hopefully you can see the first slide, and it starts with the climate challenge.
We can.
All right, so here we are, August 12th, 2020. It's now 2 years after the United Nations IPCC, the group of worldwide scientists from all the member countries, in their studies, these IPCC studies have to reach a consensus, and that means they have to water down what the extremes of their findings until they get the bulk of everyone to agree. And so they tend to be doing what we call shooting behind the duck. They're not using the most advanced science. They're using the kind of the midpoint of the science at the time. And so they tend to produce results that are alarming and not as, they're below where the facts are. So not only are they already alarming, the real facts are more alarming. But 2 years ago, they said we basically have about the remaining 10 years to substantially change every way that we are harming the climate. And it doesn't mean we get to wait 10 years before doing it. It really means we have to start now so that we have substantially changed within 10 years. So this isn't about how much time we have left. This is about we have to start now, and how fast do we have to go? So that's kind of the dilemma we're facing. All right. So now it's not an all or nothing adventure. There is, like I say, it feels like a big long slope of how much climate damage, how much warming there will be from our activities, and where will we arrest it? Where will we stop it? And where, and then how will we turn it backwards and return some normalcy again? So it's not all or nothing. So there's no reason to give up. And then the other thing is that these degrees we talk about, degrees Celsius of warming in the atmosphere, they sound small, but they're big. And these degrees Celsius are 1.8 times as big as our Fahrenheit degrees. And then also the scale is not linear. So the difference between a 2 degrees C warming, 2 degrees Celsius, and a 1.5 degrees Celsius warming is that the 2 degrees Celsius warming is 4 times the damage to ecosystems, food chains, sea level rise issues, etc. So it really makes sense for us to get working on the problem and try to hold the total rise as low as we can. It also, timing matters. Every year matters between when we start thinking about this and when we really get moving. So it was great to hear one of you saying you've already electrified a couple things, the transportation and the water heating. And so that's great to hear. And then also every decision matters. Every ton of CO2 matters. It's cumulative. It's marginal, meaning it adds on the edges, and it matters. And CO2, carbon dioxide, is a remarkably stable chemical. It doesn't burn. It's the product of burning things. It itself doesn't burn. It just sits there until it comes out in maybe plants through photosynthesis are able to take it out. But if we're decreasing the total planted matter, we're decreasing the ability to take it out. So every action is going to matter to us. And so we must generate the personal will, and that's what I'm going to work on tonight, is talking with you about us generating our personal will so that we start demonstrating these changes and taking these actions. And then we look at how to turn our personal changes into the political will that implements the policy. Somebody mentioned REACH codes, one of my favorites. These policies that get promulgated that then change everybody's default actions. Ultimately, I'd love it if just the bad choice isn't on the shelf for us. When your water heater burns out, you get the only thing there, and that was the electric heat pump water heater. And so you don't have to think about what to do and whether to do it. It's just that if you like hot water, you get the clean one. That's all that was there. But we have to start with our personal will, then our personal actions, then how to translate that to political will and into policy. The IPCC was telling us 2 years ago, we need to pursue policies that are rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented. And Janan and I both worked in government and government utilities. You can imagine how slow that can be. So this idea of working on things rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented, those are kind of the anathema to me as a former city worker. We're always told to go slow and steady, don't go too far, only copy others, don't innovate. You can call it innovation, but make sure someone else has done it first. And we need to be following and following others' footsteps. But things have changed. We've already used up all the time for delay. So we've used that luxury of delay. It's gone. We enjoyed it. Like I said, things were blissful back then. We have to do these things that are far-reaching, not small things. It's not a choice of paper versus plastic. We have to make some big actions. And prudent now means big and fast. That is a big change for us in government. That used to be prudent was slow, steady, incremental, and wait and see how everyone reacts. Now it's, that's not the way to exit a burning building. The way is get up and run. So we're more to the get up and run type of thing for how to start with climate change actions. And unprecedented means, it's not going to be all the same stuff we've tried before. We've tried laissez-faire. We've tried incentives. It takes huge incentives to try to get people to do things, big subsidies to try to get them to voluntarily forego the inertia of choosing the thing they've always chosen and now to choose the clean one. Then we also have to, because of that, we have to let go of these kind of mental, emotional anchors we have about why we aren't doing things the way we need to. So there, remember that little theme I'll talk about, letting go of these anchors of ways that are holding us to our old methods. So meanwhile, climate change continues to accelerate, and the recent studies just come out here from the reviews of geophysics, and they are saying that we're unlikely to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees C as targeted by the Paris Climate Accords. Instead, there's a 2/3 chance that temperatures by the end of the century will be from 2.6 to 3.9 degrees Celsius above historic. So that's 5 to 7 Fahrenheit sized degrees. This is the thing that's got me on edge. It's like, oh no, they're assessing that we're not moving fast enough. And so to me, this means there's no doubt that our individual actions matter. This is not a time to give up. This is a time to really start taking action. And they matter especially if we can leverage them into policy that makes progress the default path forward. That people just quit making or quit finding the bad choice. All right, so to avert climate chaos, it's kind of a worldwide legacy challenge we're all in right now. And there's no stepping off of this. We are in the worldwide legacy challenge. We're in the 2 decades that will determine the livability of the future for species like ours and many others, pretty much all the mammals. We've got a tough challenge ahead of us, and the 2 decades we're just starting now matter the most. So it's your chance to make a big difference and to set an example. And like I say, we're all choosing our legacies on the action continuum. We might be a foot dragger and actively resist, or we might be frozen in the headlights, or we might be participating and trying to keep up. We might be surging ahead like some of you are and becoming early adopters. And then others of you also are being leaders, forming this team that you formed to help inform others. So we get to choose our path, our position along this continuum of how active we'll be. And so I like to refer to Alan Atkison's amoeba of change diagram, because it's kind of a fun way to visualize what what this innovation continuum is like. And so in his amoeba of change, he draws an amoeba and this innovation out there, and the amoeba kind of slurps along. And the idea is that there's some innovation, and the innovator causes the innovation, and innovators are generally not good at marketing their innovations. They need others to help market the innovations. So they might develop a new way to do something, and then somebody called a change agent might help transform it into a slightly more practical thing, and others might transform it into an even more practical thing, and then it becomes available for the mainstream and the early adopters to start taking it up. And then there are laggards who will adopt it later, and reactionaries who might drag back. And then one idea is he has the activists getting out here and poking the amoeba to try to shove it along. But one thing about the amoeba that I like is the idea that, well, it's probably more fun for all of us to try to move from wherever we think we are, move upward. The view's probably better if we can move towards the front, become these early adopters and sharers of this type of information. So, basically though, what do we all want? Regardless of the climate, we all want satisfying lives. And so what leads to that is the tackling of challenges, being part of a bigger movement than ourselves, doing our part within that movement, being part of a solution, showing leadership and earning respect, and then hoping to be remembered for these good things we did, investing our time, our energy, our resources in things, demonstrating that personal leadership and sharing what we learn and helping others join in. So I'm trying to inspire you guys to think of that amoeba, think of where you might naturally be on some issues in it, and then think about moving on up. Um, this is just another way to look at the climate problem, but it's one where if it was set up like a Monopoly game and you only had 100 tons of CO2 allowances before you were kicked out of the game and you could no longer function. And if you recall, when you play Monopoly, it's only about money. There was only one dimension, and when you ran out of money, you're out. In Climatopoly, if it were a game, you'd be issued some money, and if you run out of that, you're out, and you're issued 100 tons, your fair share of emissions for the rest of your life. And by the way, no new people get any allowances. So the most important thing for my wife and I, with our 200 tons, was leaving some for our daughter, who also had 100. So she'd have more than 100 tons and be able to have a family of her own. So when you start thinking of Climatopoly as a game, you suddenly realize there is no strategy that makes sense where waiting works, because as you wait and you go around the board and you haven't changed your lifestyle yet, you've used up some of your allowances. And if you've ever calculated your carbon footprint, it only takes a couple years for us Americans to go through 100 tons. So, the first thing I would do is I would try to borrow money, and I would change my car, my water heater. I'd move closer to work. I'd, just do this, that, the other thing, because the whole thing is the legacy of what am I able to pass along to my teammates, my daughter. So anyway, it's just a different way to think about the climate problem. I run into lots of folks who are waiting for something to happen, and then they're going to start. And I'm looking at it going, we have everything we need. We need to quit waiting, and we need to start acting. And the world needs people to step up. All right, so what changed? I'm going to talk a lot about electrification, but what changed to make electrification green and the new green choice? And so in the old days, electric resistance heating, that's where you just put electricity through a resistance wire, and it just uses electrical friction, and it heats the wire up, and it's kind of an expensive, inefficient way to do heating. But it was about it used about twice as much gas in the power plant to heat that wire as if you had just used the gas in your home to heat the home directly. That was the old days. It used to be more efficient to burn gas in the house rather than in the power plant for the climate. But that has changed. 4 big things have changed. One was gas power plants. Back when Janan and I worked together 700 years ago, they were about 30% efficient. And now they've moved up to around 60% efficient. They're using some sophisticated technologies, combined cycles that run the gas through a jet engine type turbine first, and then all the hot exhaust goes through a steam boiler second, and then the steam from that goes through another turbine. So it double makes electricity off the same fuel. So the gas power plants themselves have doubled in efficiency. The State Renewable Portfolio Standards, RPS, has limited the fraction of gas-powered electricity that you get in any kilowatt hour. And so now the state RPS has targets of 60% renewable by the year 2030. And then these community choice energy agencies like Silicon Valley Clean Energy, the one serving most of your territory down there, or San Jose Clean Energy, or up here where I am, Peninsula Clean Energy, they've radically reduced the amount of gas power in their mix. It's down to 0 or 7% in most of these clean community choice energy areas. So now the electricity is very clean. The other thing that happened is heat pumps have become much better than what we remember. And so I still run into old plumbers and mechanical folks who talk about heat pumps being a problem, and that's not where they are anymore. California is a little bit of a backwater as far as knowing about heat pumps because there's been so much cheap gas in California. The modern heat pumps have variable speed drive, and so that means they've got a compressor motor that can go at all kinds of different speeds, so it can just exactly match the needs that it needs to put out at any time. And it ends up being 4 times as efficient at heating a house as a gas furnace is, meaning it gets 4 times as much energy out of the electricity that goes into it as happens. At first, that sounds like a violation of the first law of thermodynamics, but it's not. What a heat pump is doing is using the electrical energy to drive the motor, and the motor is running a backwards refrigeration cycle that goes and grabs heat out of the yard, out of air in the yard. It cools off the yard. It grabs that heat and it puts it into the house. It jacks it up to a nice warm temperature and uses it to heat the house. I've got a heat pump water heater also, and mine uses basement air, and so it just cools off the basement a little bit, about 2 or 3 degrees, and it heats the water up over 120 Fahrenheit by running this backwards refrigerator. The other thing that's happened is methane's dirty little secret was discovered. Methane as a chemical is uniquely effective at plugging one of the radiative gaps in our atmosphere that the Earth uses to keep its temperature balanced. The methane molecule is a tetrahedron. It's a shape like a triangular pyramid. It oscillates at the frequency that interferes with the frequency of radiating our long wave heat radiation back into space. So it's corking our, it's plugging or gagging our ability to reject heat into space. It ends up being 30 times as bad if it is leaked than if it is burned. So burning methane, if you have methane like from a landfill, we need to burn it so that it doesn't leak into the atmosphere. But leakage from gas pipelines is more than 3% of the production and delivery of the pipeline. And each molecule leaked or pound leaked or whatever you want to call it, each volume leaked is 30 times as bad because it was leaked than if it was burned. The result of looking at these factors is we can tell electric heat is now 7 to 20 times cleaner than gas heat. So we need to go electric. The State Energy Commission gets that. I was at an Energy Commission online meeting today. It was really great to watch. They were approving the reach codes for the city of Davis and the city of San Luis Obispo. And they got so many public comments from 29 folks who were strongly supportive of these reach codes and want to make all electric the new baseline code for new buildings built starting 2023. And there was only one opposition from a gentleman from Southern California Gas Company whose livelihood depends on selling methane. And they said that the state should slow down. Okay, but anyway, a lot of us want to speed up and rescue the future. So today, we're going to look at how do we take advantage of this energy transition, this much cleaner electricity and these new technologies for how to put it to work better than putting fossil fuels to work. So the electric supply is cleaner now. Congratulations on SVCE. They've been carbon-free since 2016. My own Peninsula Clean Energy is going to be carbon-free in 2021. They're about 90% carbon-free now. These clean electricity portfolios create these green stepping stones, and those help you find your way to the secure, healthy, fossil-free home legacy. So the new building code cycle has 14 strong reach codes in San Mateo and Santa Clara County, and 2 more cities are looking at doing it still. And so it's been something I've been very proud of. Our counties, the cities in our counties have been stepping forward and making these reach code decisions and showing the state this kind of leadership. And the Energy Commission was acknowledging that today. And so we've got a bit of a back and forth going between the cities and the state. And so some of us, like my city of Menlo Park, just sent a letter to the Energy Commission tonight asking them to make all electric the base code in 2023. We call it the 2022 code, but it becomes effective in the year 2023. We want that to be the base code, that's the default thing you get. And that will free up our time where we won't have to make another REACH code. We'll be able to make other progress steps that we have to be working on. So congratulations on this California leadership. So California gets a lot of kudos for its leadership, but the cities are what is trying to lead the state now. And so the state kicked it off. They're wanting 40% greenhouse gas reductions from present levels, roughly present levels, by the year 2030. So about a 40% reduction across the next 10 years. They want an 80% reduction by 2050. And we need it. When I first heard about this rule coming out, and I remember it was during the Schwarzenegger administration, I thought it must have been a typo, an 80% reduction. And this is interesting for me because I've always thought of myself as an environmentalist, and to realize I thought this was a typo. I thought, no, they must mean reduce to 80%. No, we have to reduce by 80% down to 20% by 2050. And the new policy is to go carbon neutral even before that, by 2045. So I've personally had to go through the evolution of letting go of these anchors of old things I knew, the old myths, the old thoughts about how we would get by, how little changes would make it. And I've had to come to grips with, no, this is big. These are big changes. Now, they're not lifestyle changes. They don't have to be. We can do it with our regular lifestyle. We just have to change the technology and infrastructure that delivers our lifestyle. We can be just as warm, have just as much hot water, but we have to do the warming, cooling, heating all differently, all with electricity that's clean. So it's a lot of policy and infrastructure change. The other way to do it is to get in everyone's face and make them change how they get to work, how far they're allowed to go, how many kids they're allowed to have, what they're allowed to eat. And that's a pretty draconian future. I'm hoping we don't get there on the lifeboat, but I'm hoping we can do this with technology changes. All right, so to achieve this 80% reduction in carbon dioxide, and this little E over here, CO2E, means carbon dioxide equivalent, so that would include any of the high impact gases like methane from natural gas, or landfills, or cows. So ultimately what this 80% reduction in CO2 means is we could get there, but there's no room for natural gas in homes or business buildings. There is still some room maybe in some industries that need it, and in some wintertime power plants for a few years. So I think there will be some natural gas flowing on the big pipes, but I don't think we'll have room in our carbon budget for natural gas flowing in all the little leaky pipes that go out to our homes. The air will be cleaner though, with all those electric vehicles and clean homes, and it'll be healthier to breathe. Gas rates will rise 4 to 6 times their current level, because as you decrease the flow through the pipeline system, the reduced pipe flow, there's less sales of the product, but they still have to pay for all the costs of the pipeline. And most of the cost in natural gas, or all of the cost really, if you look all the way to the well, it's all in the infrastructure. The ground doesn't charge you any money for the chemical, but it's all the infrastructure you put into the ground and into compressing the gas and piping it along and metering it. All that stuff exists no matter what flow goes through it. And so as we cut the flow on the gas system, the rates will rise. So it doesn't even make sense to compare electric and gas rates now. You need to think of what will success be like. As we get serious about fighting the climate problem, there will be less flow, there will be higher gas rates. The last customers will pay for all the pipes. So it's kind of a race for the exits. Natural gas is one thing where if you boycott it, which say use electrification, your boycott makes other people pay more, and then they'll use less. Whereas if you boycott grapes just get cheaper. and other people eat more grapes. And so it's kind of interesting with natural gas. Your boycott has a big advantage. Now, flamophiles, who are addicted to flame, can still use some propane here and there, and that's got less of a leakage problem because it's a different chemical and it doesn't plug that hole in the atmosphere. Although its carbon dioxide is still its long-term problem. That's why they could only use a little. Or sustainable hydrogen, if it in the future becomes sustainable. They'd make it different than they make it now. The long-run economics are that climate damages will likely exceed about $260 per ton of carbon dioxide we're emitting on the margin. And that carbon dioxide capture and sequestration, so pulling it out of the air, compressing it, and putting it deep underground where it goes into rock formations, not to come back out again. That type of thing may be needed or will be needed to reduce the damage costs. This carbon capture and sequestration, called CCS, it'll cost $100 or $200 a ton. It'll be needing to happen on a scale that's really big, about the size of the oil industry's economic operation, to be sequestering 10% of emissions from the beef people are still eating and the other choices people are making that we haven't electrified out. So, and also CO2 lasts hundreds of years in the atmosphere. So it's not a degrading chemical. Again, it's super stable. Once it's up there until a plant takes it out. And so ironically, we're currently only pricing CO2 at zero most of the time, or only $20 a ton for industry who has to buy allowances in California. And so the irony is it's $0 to $20, but it's going to cost $200 to remove. So that's a big economic problem that we have not got the right signal yet. So what it causes is, if we just follow our wallets, we notice that we end up making decisions that really are looting the future from our children and other victim species like children. And that is not fair. And so, we need to take a look at this. We can decarbonize for costs usually typically $0 to about $50 a ton for a viable future. That'll be cheaper than the $100 to $200 a ton to do the carbon capture and sequestration, and they're both a lot cheaper than the damage that will be done. So I advocate that we ought to start adopting policies that price carbon. Home technology and grid technology have both improved. I only want to look at the far right side of this, but back when Janan and I worked together in the 1980s, there were a few things you could do to be clean, but they generally involved some suffering. Riding a bike, although I love riding a bike. But now we've got plenty of clean options like electric cars. We still have bikes, and now we have lots of electric bikes that are pretty fun too. Heat pump water heaters can be pretty clean. The reason I'm showing them here at 93% clean is in these factors, I still got a little bit of electric transmission losses still being supplied by fossil-fired power plants. So far, no policy has covered that yet. So once a policy comes along to get rid of allowing fossil-fired generation to supply the transmission losses, then these things will all move up to 100%. But we basically have moved from things like electric resistance drying of clothes. Now we've got heat pump clothes dryers and electric resistance. They both still work. In cooking, I'm really loving our new electric induction cooktop that we put in a couple months ago, replaced our gas cooktop. It's much faster, more efficient, more controllable, and it's nice not to smell the gas anymore. And we put in a heat pump. We put in two types, a mini split and a little window heat pump. We put in a heat pump water heater. We still have not switched over to an electric car. We still drive maybe 5,000 or 6,000 miles a year on our Prius. So that's a point where we have to make a change over at my house. All right, decarbonizing the household energy. Does it matter where you start? In other words, should you start here with the transportation like electric vehicles, or should you stop everything until you insulate your house, or should you change your electric supplier, like put up solar on your roof, or get rid of your natural gas? What is it? And I think it doesn't really matter where you start. You just need to figure out which one you want to start on and do it. Sometimes it's not convenient to insulate your house, and so you might switch over to getting rid of the natural gas and putting in heat pumps. And certainly anytime you need another vehicle, I would not buy another internal combustion engine car again. We have made that pledge at home. So while we have our Prius, we're not going to get another car like it that has an internal combustion engine. So that's kind of like a no stranded assets policy that we've made at our house. There's another little loop of 3 things that go together in decisions. It's solar electricity on the roof. You don't need to do it for the climate because of these clean power mixes I've been talking about that you automatically get. Your rooftop solar is not about you helping the climate. It's about you helping your wallet by having a cheaper source of electricity. Solar on the roof is now about 1/4 as expensive as grid electricity. So the reason to do solar is to just help your wallet, and it helps you afford even more electrification. But if you had an old roof and you were trying to decide, should I put solar on my old roof or get a new roof first? It costs about 1 cent per kilowatt hour if you were to put solar on an old roof and then take it off to re-roof and put it back on. It adds, over the life of the solar system, it adds maybe only 1 cent a kilowatt hour to that cost, raising it from, say, 7 cents a kilowatt hour to 8. But if you notice, both 7 cents and 8 cents are lower than 20 cents, which is what grid electricity costs. So it kind of doesn't matter which way you go. They're both fine. So it's kind of like, oh, you just need to start somewhere. Go ahead and decide. Then the tax credit, we currently have a 26% tax credit on solar. And in fact, it covers the roof if you have to re-roof that section for solar. And that tax credit is scheduled to decline and go away. So you might want to put solar up while you can still get the tax credit. So that's one where a closing tax credit window makes you want to do solar and new roof if you really needed a new roof. The other thing we run into is some people have a 100 amp electrical panel, and that allows you to use 24 kilowatts of electricity. So it's a lot of power coming in. Kilowatts are a unit of power. And but other modern homes, maybe they're built with a big gluttonous 200 amp panel that allows 48 kilowatts of use on the property. So these folks with the 100 amp panel, they look at this decision. They're trying to decide, do I upsize my panel, spend $3,000 on a new electric panel to go up to 200 amps? And if everybody does that, we have to upsize the whole grid. Or do I go on an amp diet or power diet and I just pick my appliances to be the more efficient ones? And I have controls that keep my, that pause my car charger for the 20 minutes while my induction range is running. So there's those kind of solutions. And I work on the amp diet solution. I've been developing that with a couple of different firms. Okay, but the transition is on basically all over now. In California, the transition to clean energy and electrification is on, and it will build up speed as we become more rational about this. And and I want to tell you again, I'm one of those folks who didn't think we'd have to move as fast as I do now. The more I look at the real science of this, the more alarmed I become about, oh, wow, we need to stop frittering. We need to stop waiting for something. We need to start acting and demonstrating and demanding our leaders follow and put policies through that get everyone going. So you've heard this term, first stop the bleeding. Okay, it's slightly different with the climate. First stop cutting yourself. Then the bleeding will stop. So don't do the things that lead to emissions. So I'm going to want you to make a pledge to yourself and start thinking about this. The pledge: I will no longer buy any fossil-fired car or gas appliance or system. And so it's basically saying, I will not start another gas asset that lives for 10, 20, or 30 years that spews carbon emissions into the atmosphere that cause $260 a ton damage while I'm not charged anything, because that would not be fair. These things are obsolete. They cause emissions that linger for hundreds of years. I will not strand new obsolete assets. I'm not stupid. I'm not short-sighted. I'm not selfish. So it's just, we need to start doing that. And so we've gotten our city council to adopt a policy in Menlo Park that as anything burns out in the city, they will not replace it with a fossil thing. And I think at our homes, we need to go to that same policy until we can get these things taken off the shelves. Okay, how to make it cheaper for yourself. It's the second part. I will make the arrangements that make it cheaper to follow the pledge. Okay, sometimes that involves, I will go out of my way next time I've got an electrician over to put in a conduit for the water heater, even though my water heater hasn't burned out yet. But because it is really hard to transition your water heater right now in today's underdeveloped market, it's hard to do it in one day. When your spouse wants hot water, and you've been on a gas water heater and you wanted to ride it to the end, because that's what our intuition is that it's better to keep using assets we have than to abandon them partway through their life. And that's intuition that may need to change, but that's the one that we naturally have. And so I need to start making the arrangements to get in the circuits that will allow me to transition. And the second part, I won't use the excuse that I forgot to make the arrangements. And it's so sad for me to hear my fellow environmentalists telling stories of, I knew I had to do the upgrade, but I kept putting it off. My water heater failed. I have a spouse. I had to go gas. And so they've stranded a new gas water heater, who knows for how long, if they're willing to take it out midlife. Like I took out my 3-year-old gas water heater to put in a heat pump water heater. And so, it can just become a spare that the plumbers use to get people through a couple days. Okay, the last point, okay, I will strive to replace things before they burn out. So this is the kind of thing that we can do, is just make this mindset change of, I'm not going to ride these obsolete assets into the ground, causing maximum environmental damage and then painting me into a corner to replace them with the same thing. I'm going to be proactive and take the pledge and quit doing it. All right, so what to do first? These opportunities come along. Don't miss out on the opportunities. Avoid any new strandings. So timing triggers, when to do an electric vehicle. Lease or buy one now. Don't try to use up your old car. Sell your old car. It goes on the market. They need it in Texas. They have a 500-year storm every 2 years now, and those cars get flooded. So they become part of a reef or something they're building there. So probably they're really recycled, but the cars get damaged. Anyway, get rid of your gas car. If you follow Tony Seba, he says the blue book value on them is about to plummet as electric vehicles come down to first cost parity with gas cars. Insulation, you do it any time, especially if you had to pull your roof off or remodel. So if any time's a good time to insulate. But a lot of people are afraid to open that can of worms. Heat pump water heaters, do the circuit now and convert before your gas water heater's 10th birthday, because after they're 10 years old, they're ready to go anytime. Heat pump space conditioning, so that's heating and cooling. So central heat pumps replacing air conditioner. So anytime you need to replace your air conditioner, because your air conditioner is already a heat pump, it's a one-way heat pump. It only pumps heat out of the house. Regular things I call heat pumps can be two-way heat pumps. They pump heat into the house in the winter and out of the house in the summer. So if anytime you want another air conditioner, make sure it has two-way capability. All right. The mini split heat pump space conditioning, so do that anytime you want more comfort, either more heating or more cooling or more quiet in your house. When we stopped using our gas furnace, our winters got a lot more quiet. I really didn't like the rumble and high wind speed of the gas furnace. And now it's nice to have heat pumps that do this quieter. But the thing about a mini split heat pump is you can do it to solve problem rooms. Let's say you've got one room that tends to overheat, or another room that tends to be under, too cold in the winter. So a heat pump is a way to focus, mini split heat pump's a way to focus more control on a problem room. And then anytime you want a window air conditioner, get a window heat pump instead. I bought one, a Frigidaire brand, and it's really nice. We use it for our winter heating upstairs. And then I've got a mini split for the downstairs. So when to do solar on your roof? When your roof ideally has more than 15 years of life left, or if you want the tax credit, it's 26% this year, it's 22% next year, it's 0 or something in the year 2022. It's scheduled to go to 0. I see it fading away there, but I have an idea that it's like, it may matter who you vote for. This thing might be savable. So home battery, maybe get a home battery sometime. I'm not a big fan of them just yet, but things are going to change with solar net energy metering rates. So things may change on the economics of home batteries. All right. Just not wanting to, I can come back to this kind of actions for renters and things like that, but maybe I'll just skip ahead so we save more time for your questions. But basically, anytime your things are getting old, start looking at how do you replace it with a heat pump. All right, this little slide is kind of cartoony. These lines help show, it reads in a vertical direction. And so think of packaging these changes. And so the changes are shown here by these icons: solar on the roof, electric vehicle, heat pump water heater, heat pump space conditioning. And so the first thing I did was a heat pump water heater, and my electric rate was 25 cents. And then, but by switching to heat pump space conditioning, I was able to get cheaper electricity. If you're on PG&E, and I'm in PCE, but I still have PG&E delivering my power, I can get on the 5-cent cheaper electric rate by having no gas heating. So once I just told them I don't have gas heat anymore, they put me on the lower rate. If you've got an electric vehicle, you can get into a rate that gives you a lot of hours at a lower rate. And then there's synergy. And so having an electric vehicle, say, gave my heat pump water heater, it would give my heat pump water heater a chance to use cheaper electricity. And then once you start doing solar, it gives you a chance to use all this 7 or 6 cent electricity. So I'm trying to point out that by packaging up and thinking ahead to where you'll eventually be, you'll be able to notice you can have this cheaper forms of electricity. Timing preferences. Now, these are not rules, and we need to keep out of a rule-based thought pattern, except for this rule of don't strand new assets. But the timing preferences are solar anytime now, and you might want to do it while the tax credits are big. But it'll still make sense even without the tax credits. Just, you will have missed out on the tax credit, that's all. EVs are fun now, and they're a lower cost vehicle to own through its whole life, including the first cost, because there's no maintenance and very little fuel cost. So let's see. Look at a central heat pump anytime your central air conditioning is getting old. If you have that central AC, think it replaces just with a cube in the yard the same size as your central air conditioner. It's just that cube has a little two-way valve in it. That's all. And then you don't need a furnace. That cube in the yard can do the cooling and the heating. So it quits loafing all winter and you get to put it to work. Anytime you have an electrician visit, get them to do a water heater conduit and have them install an electric outlet, a 220 volt outlet called a NEMA 1450 outlet in your garage that can power your soon to come along electric vehicle. Also, these packages, it saves a lot of carbon and a lot of money. The interesting thing here, let's just go between this bottom row where The lifetime gross savings of heat pump water heater in a car over 20 years is something like $12,000 and 58 tons of CO2. By adding solar, the tons of CO2 went up a little bit. The dollar savings went up a lot, 2.5 times. Solar saved a whole lot of dollars and a little bit of carbon. But anyway, so adding these electrification things together really makes sense. So I want to flip the script a little bit and talk about what to avoid instead of what to do. Avoid getting a tankless water heater. They're going to be, they are climate damaging, and they are hard to replace. So don't do it. If you don't have one, please don't get one. They're harder to replace, and they don't have any earthquake water. My heat pump water heater is got 50 gallons of fresh water strapped to the wall, and also that it's grid friendly. And whereas tankless water heaters are tough on the gas grid, they demand that the gas grid flow a lot and run at a high pressure in the winter, and that's not safe. Okay, avoid solar thermal water heating. And Janan knows I used to be the solar thermal water heating engineer for Palo Alto. But solar thermal water heating only does about 70% of the water heating and costs $9,000. For less than half that, you can get a heat pump water heater that does all of the water heating. Avoid waiting for the next thing. So avoid old rules of thumb that tell you you should delay and wear everything out. We're not in the let's delay mode anymore. We're in the we have to start moving mode. So avoid the risk of gas water heater burnout. So quit trying to save by risking that maybe it'll last a while longer. You know, start working on your replacement plan and get rid of that thing. Avoid buying any air conditioner that doesn't have heat pump capability to reverse and do the heating as well. It only adds about $100 to $400 to the cost of any air conditioner to have that two-way valve that flips over inside it. Avoid stranding any new gas asset. We already went over that pledge. Avoid sitting around like I'm doing and using up my gas car. Sell it before they're obsolete, before that blue book plunges on it. And avoid exposing your family to gas cooking fumes, the formaldehyde and the NOx, the nitrous oxide. There's no safe level for this. And so their studies are finding that there's a 42% more likelihood of childhood asthma in a home with gas cooking than in a home with electric cooking. So just that one little factoid is telling me, well, these things are problems for human lungs. All right, that gets me to the end of my prepared comments and ready to start listening. And I wanted to just wrap up with the idea of let's let go of these anchors and excuses and then internalize this for our own legacies, that we want to be the people who take action. We're in this 20-year period that matters. We're just starting it. We want to be the actors. We don't want our descendants to look back and say, they had all the information. And what did they do? You know, and to be disappointed in us. We want them to look back at us and go, yeah, they started the transition. And that transition kept things from getting worse. So we need to get started reducing danger, finding happiness. Whoop, got all excited there about finding happiness, and making our families proud and optimistic. And the only prudent speed is full speed. And so the question is, how might we make our families make footprints of pride? So hopefully I've helped show how addressing the greenhouse gas emissions is important part of our household legacy, how it's part of how we provide security, hope, and comfort to our families at home. Doing this transition is what's providing security, hope, and comfort. And as a father, I kind of feel like, hey, that's one of my roles, is to provide security, hope, and comfort at home. And so then addressing climate can make life more satisfying. And we're able to be these heroes we need. There's no one silver bullet. There is silver buckshot. So there's not one thing. It's not like fusion's going to save us, or we have to wait for thorium reactors or something like that. We need everything. And so one thing we know for sure from doing the studies, we need a lot of electrification. So that's what I focused on. A lot of the other stuff will happen in the background by the utility planners and those folks, researchers and engineers. They'll get a lot of stuff in order. But personal action is the stepping stone to political action. You taking action and talking to your council people about it gets your city to advance and show the state how it's done. And California is the state that many states and countries look to. So you can see the little hierarchy of leadership, and it starts with you. You acting at home, sharing with your neighbors and your city acting, sharing with the state acting, other states and countries following. So it's a system that works. And oh, shameless pitch for low-cost solar. I volunteer with a group called sunwork.org that provides low-cost solar to people who have low electric bills or to people who are electrifying. So folks who are putting in heat pump water heaters. We don't put in heat pump water heaters, but I'm trying to get us to start doing it, but we don't yet. Anyway, if you're going to get a heat pump water heater, then it helps you qualify to be one of our customers who gets a low-cost solar system, lower, about a third, about 30% cheaper than most for-profit companies. We're a little nonprofit that trains volunteers how to do solar installation. So we do this volunteer training, and that's where I learned enough to run the conduits and circuits to do my own home electrification that saves me a lot of money. So here's the pitch also to get involved in the volunteer side of it. Learn about doing your own stuff. If you don't feel like spending a lot of money, do the volunteer training, do your own electrification.
Thanks, Tom. That was a great presentation. I think we'll try to take at least a couple of questions. So the first one that we've got is, where is the biggest impact? Electrifying houses, apartment buildings, or industrial buildings?
Yeah, I haven't been working at all on the industry, and in the industry, it's most likely to be the industrial process, not the building itself, the heating and cooling the building, I would think. But the apartments or homes, yeah, it just depends on each city, their makeup mix of these things. You know, one of the biggest places that occurs is happening really quickly. It's the electric vehicles. For a given family, a kind of an average family, electrifying the vehicle is where you'll have the biggest carbon impact fastest. And it's also very easy because a new electric vehicle rolls up onto your driveway practically by itself. Whereas it's more effort to put in the heat pump water heater. You know, it takes plumbing and electrical connections, things like this. An electric vehicle, they come with a 110-volt plug you can plug into any outlet, and it charges slowly at about 3 miles per hour. So say 24 miles in 8 hours overnight. But you can also plug them into the dryer outlet that's 220 volts. Anyway, so the biggest single thing, if let's say for some reason you were limited to only one thing you could do, the electric vehicle is the one easy thing you can do. I spend a lot of time working on the hard problem, which is electrification of buildings. And it's just where I want to focus because it needs help, and I'm ready to help.
Great. And the second question is the recommendation about the heat pump water heaters apply to something as big as a pool?
Yes, in fact, I'll try to share resources with the group. So I'm part of a team that writes guides to all electric buildings. And in our guides, we have equipment lists, so that lists example equipment. And something I didn't know about coming from California. Again, we're a very gas-centric state compared to other states and other countries. It's funny how electrification is so prevalent in Asia and Europe and not very prevalent here in California. It's more prevalent in the southern part of the US than it is in California. They're way ahead of us. They're building 40% of their housing stock for the past decade or two is all electric across the South. The reasons they're ahead is they don't have as much access to cheap gas, and they have humidity problems they have to deal with. And heat pumps are really great at managing humidity. So they're ahead of us, and they've been using heat pump water heaters, heat pump pool heaters for years. So you can replace your gas pool heater with a heat pump pool heater that's a big box, looks a lot like the Yard Cube for air conditioner, and it extracts heat from the yard and jacks up the temperature and puts it in the pool.
Great, thank you. And last question here. If I have somebody that's asking me a question about how to do more, is there some central place to go get easy information to share?
Yeah, so Silicon Valley Clean Energy has started a new page on their site. So I'd go to SVCE, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and I forget if they're a .com or how they represent themselves on the web, but follow to their eHub, and that's where they share information about their electrification programs, and they have incentives and information. And so that's a good spot for folks to go. And then part of this team that I'm part of with Redwood Energy Partners and Menlo Spark and the Fossil Free Buildings Coalition, we're all working together right now on a new guide that exactly discusses the problem I'm talking about tonight, which is how do we retrofit buildings? How do we, instead of building all electric from scratch, how do we retrofit our existing buildings? And so that guide will come out in a couple of months, and it'll have a number of case studies, but some of the case studies are already up on SVCE's, Silicon Valley Clean Energy's website. So that'll be a good resource to look at.
Great. Well, you've given us a lot of information here, a lot to think about, and hopefully some good action will come of this. And we've all got to take the pledge. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jenny, who's going to be telling us a little bit about what happens next in a couple of weeks.
Tom, first, I just have to really thank you. You get me into that sense of urgency that I really need to take action. And I think that you build the case that there's no excuse for any of us not to get started on some level. Policy, at the very least, advocating for change, especially in California, where gas wells are still being developed. So, yeah, so people may not know this. The next session we're going to do in 2 weeks is actually on zero waste. And one of the fastest, easiest, most cost-efficient, short-term climate solution changes you can make is by reducing your consumption to begin with. Adopting a zero waste lifestyle it reduces greenhouse gas emissions by the strategies that we're going to be discussing, if taken globally, can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by more than 400 million metric tons of CO2 per year. That's the equivalent of taking over 20% of US coal-fired power plants off the grid now. And I'd really like to reach out to people who have ideas and are implementing ideas already to come share like a workshop style. We're going to have Dr. Christina Perez, a professor of biological sciences and environmental health research. She's going to share what she's done in her house, best practices, products, recipes, tools, and techniques. These are also very frugal ways to continue working in your house and going about your work as being a consumer. Sorry, I'm losing my tongue here because I'm so excited about it. So please join us, be ready to learn new tips, share some of your own, and please spread the word. I hope to get a good turnout for that night so that we can really build a something in our community that we can all be proud of. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. We plan to, you can see from this schedule that we are planning meetings every other Wednesday night through October 7th, and we're planning to extend this discussions after that. We welcome you to join us when you can. Together we really can make a difference, and I agree with Tom, we got to do everything as fast as we can. Information about this series is available online, and I'll send out the link to that to everyone who's online today. And thank you for joining us. And now I'd like to end with a prayer. Please join me in the Interfaith Climate Prayer from Interfaith Power and Light that they used in their Action Week last April. We hold the earth. We hold brothers and sisters who suffer from storms and droughts intensified by climate change. We hold all species that suffer. We hold world leaders delegated to make decisions for life. We pray that the web of life may be mended through courageous actions to limit carbon emissions. We pray for right actions for adaptation and mitigation to help our already suffering Earth community. We pray that love and wisdom might inspire our actions as individuals and as communities, so that we may, with integrity, look into the eyes of brothers and sisters and all beings and truthfully say, we are doing our part to care for them and the future of the children. May love transform us and our world with new steps toward life. Amen.